Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I really cherish it to participate in the kickoff of the IAS meetings. It's for some time that I'm trying to persuade the organization to introduce the topic of sustainability to as a main topic of the conference, and I'm very happy that you selected this year to introduce this topic as the main topic. And it's really a very nice place to do it here in Rio, as Rio is a special place. And even, I don't know if you noticed, but last night we saw that even we got a green light from the cross. It's the first time I see Corcovado with a green light on it. The topic that I would like to, usually a professor gives a talk, is full of data and graphs and things, and I'm not going to do that. On the contrary, I like to draw a very general picture of a topic, and really what I'd like to introduce is my stand that we are now in a critical choice point for the well-being of the globe, as a matter of fact. And I join you to, or I invite you to join me in this stand, because I think that the insurance business has a lot to do with it, and can have the solution. And really, in a way, it is well connected, although we didn't talk about it earlier with Mr. Megavik, but the ideas that he presented are very similar or in the same direction that what I'm trying to say. I think that it's time for the insurance to take back and regain the place that it lost in the world economy. We should go back to the risk management, which is our expertise, and we should start thinking about really global issues which are endangering our existence. And the most important thing really here is the fact that you'll see that the most important risk that we are having here is that it's a risk that we are really on fire. It's a fire alarm. So I'm trying to make a wake-up call here. I think that we need some unconventional solutions. And the picture of Archimedes here is not just by coincidence. Because he said, give me a place to stand and I can move the earth. And insurance can be used, and I did it over the years. I really specialized in it over a few decades, almost 4.5, almost 5 decades really, of working in insurance. That I specialized in using insurance instruments as a big leverage to make big changes happen. One example, this little example, happened really in this continent. In the early 80s, I participated in a small group of experts on a huge project, the project to increase the food production in the entire Latin America. This was a project which was financed by the AID, and thousands of people worked on it. The main idea, or the main solution that we found, was how to help the farmers get better technology in order to increase the food production. And the way to do that was to get financing. But who will give financing to a poor farmer that his crop is at risk? So the only solution was to do it through insurance. And we arranged insurance, agricultural insurance throughout this continent, and it increased the production substantially. The only way really to implement a big change in the economy is to have a vision. Once you have a vision, you have to support it by commitment. And then you have to continue aiming at the target, because otherwise you won't be able to get it. Take, for example, one big change that took place, a paradigm shift really, that took place in the 60s. President Kennedy announced in 61, he announced his stand that the United States is going to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade. And really, in July 69, we had this picture. Maybe some of you remember that picture. It was a very exciting moment for all of us. It's the first time we saw Earth rising on the moon. And it was the first time that we got an idea that we are really taking part on a small planet in the entire universe, in the middle of nowhere, really, and that we are sort of united in one problem, in one challenge. In that moment, really big things did happen. Since then, we faced one advance after another advance, and it is called now the post-industrial revolution. And right now, we are all of us are connected with via satellites to the web of knowledge, through the internet, through Facebook, through YouTube, through whatever you like, Wikipedia. What an extraordinary world that we live in. This world of the post-industrial revolution is characterized by exponential growth models. An exponential growth or exponential change model is a model that is based on a constant rate of change over a long period. What happens there is that it changes, grows or declines for a fairly long period without noticing really the process is there. But then suddenly, the absolute change from one period to the other is becoming really big and sometimes very dramatic. We are surrounded by processes like this. Take, for example, just to understand it, take a Petri dish example. You start growing bacteria in a Petri dish. At first, it grows and grows. It doubles each time, let's say. And it's unnoticeable because there is a lot of space. We were in that situation for a long time, and we felt that the world is an endless, really, place for us, and there is enough place to grow and change. However, at a certain point in time, the absolute change is very dramatic. Just one doubling before the end of the process, before the Petri dish is full of these bacteria, one doubling before that, it was only half full. And three times earlier, three doublings earlier, it was maybe less than 6% full. Okay? So this is a hockey stick model, and that's why we have it here on the graph. A long period of no change, and then a sudden rise. Let's take a look of some of the processes around us and to see it. For example, population. Everybody knows this graph. The population has changed dramatically. Over millenniums, it was more or less no change. Well, it was small. And then in the 1800, suddenly we reached already the level of 1 billion people. Then, within 1 century, at the year 1900, we suddenly had already 1.6 billion people. So the change in 100 years, in 1 century, was equivalent to what happened in the whole millennium before it. And then between 1900 and 200, the next century, we reached 6.1 billion people. So the net increase during that century alone was 4.5 billion people, an enormous number. And suddenly Tom Friedman come up with a book named, the world is crowded. And this is one of the processes. And we have many other in the social arena. What I'll be talking about today is about what I call C, the social, economic, and environmental arena. And we'll have to talk about all these three together. So this is one aspect, the social aspect. We have many other aspects as well. We had it's an interim point. When we have such a growth and we feel crowded, there is a growing interdependency among all the individuals and all the units in this space. Because what one person is doing in Japan affects us here in Rio without noticing. And it requires a new type of management and a new way of thinking, a new democracy in order to change, to manage such a big process. We need a new type of democracy in order to enable, to be still attentive to the desires and needs of individuals and groups. And we'll have to use new ways of communication, the new methods that we have, and I'm pretty sure that within the next few years, we'll see big changes in the way democracy is behaving. We have, for example, another arena. Let's talk about the economics. In economics, we see big changes. For example, the consumption changed. The consumption per capita is growing. Therefore, the growth process here is even more remarkable than the growth of the population. Then we have other economic processes, the same hockey stick model, all around the economy. The use of resources, the depletion of resources, the disappearance of energy sources and whatever. Think about it, the big changes we have just faced. About 200 years ago, there was very little use for oil. Maybe people used it to grease their wagon wheels. And in the ancient Egypt, they used the tar to mummify corpses. That's it. But then, in the last 150 years, we almost depleted all the oil that it took millions of years to accumulate and to create it. And in 150 years, we almost depleted it. We have another 50 years, 60 years, whatever. You know, now there are more discoveries, but they are marginal. It's hard to get them. You have to drill deeper and deeper, etc. Arable land is disappearing. All kinds of changes are happening now. The same thing happens with the environment. The same thing, depletion of resources. Water getting more scarce, pollution is growing, the waste accumulates, the air is getting polluted, the seawater are getting polluted, arable land it disappears because of poor care of the topsoil and whatever. In the last 4 decades alone, and now I'm trying to put the emphasis on the environmental risk. In the last 4 beautiful decades that we just had, we managed to destroy 80% of all the fishing areas, 30% of all the plants and animals. It's a disaster. So we damaged or put the microorganisms in the sea, in the oceans, under such a stress because of the growing acidity and other effects and the growing opaqueness of the water. And they are very crucial for us because they make about half of all the oxygen that we use. So these are very drastic processes, and we have to take care of it. Because right now, we are reaching, with all these exponential hockey stick models around us, we are reaching almost a perfect storm situation. It's our Petri dish is reaching its limits. We are reaching the limits to growth, and it's happening now. right now, there is this conference I'm participating in also, parallel to this one. I'm on the delegation, the Israeli official delegation to the Rio 20. So they are talking there about the topics of environmental issues or whatever. In 1992, the first Rio conference was the first world conversation on these issues. 20 years later, there was a lot of talking and very little of doing. And it's about time to do something. Because really, the harshest of the truth is regardless of what we do to the human being, are doing to the planet, the Earth will survive. But we, on the other hand, may get booted out of the game altogether. So really, we are now playing the game for our lives. And it's about time to recognize it. We are playing, and these are probably the last decades, that we still have a chance to change things because it's a battle for our life. And it's impossible to, and unbearable really, to have the feeling that business as usual, well, we are sustainable, we continue growing. It's not true, because there are big risks around us, and we are just like an ostrich putting our heads into the sun. Are you hearing the alarms? Are you hearing them ringing? Think about it, that within a few, let's say in a few hundred years, an archaeologist will excavate the layer of the 21st century, and will find some of the bones there, and he will think, he will ask himself or herself some questions. What did these people think about? What were they thinking? Didn't they realize that they were going to and doing that to themselves? And maybe that person would think it also, I hope we are not that short-sighted. So while our economies grew and material environment has flourished, our environment has been ruined. It's impossible to do that. Because what's the sense of maintaining business that ruins its environment? It's like cutting the tree that you're standing on. The only way to handle this situation, and there are some options, but I'm very optimistic, by the way, about it. But there are options, and the only way to deal with it is to find a way to decouple the economic growth from the environmental ruin. And there are ways of doing it. So it's not a postulate that you have to grow from an agrarian country, poor and clean country, into a rich and dirty country. You don't have to go through that stage. We have to find a way to grow for poor and clean into rich and clean. And there are ways of doing it. But the question is, how did it happen? The capitalistic system tells us that the invisible hand should take, when everybody is looking for maximization of the wealth, it should automatically take care of the optimization process. What did go wrong here? So there are some economic issues, some environmental issues which are economic issues, and we have to consider them. People were talking about climate change. Climate change is an economic risk, a big one, economic challenge. However, and it is responsible, some estimates are talking about between 5 to 20% of the global GDP per year. This is the cost. But this is not the most important one. There is another one, the loss of the ecosystem. This is a much more serious one. And still not the most important one. in my opinion. And then there is a third one, the declining biodiversity. The UN has declared this decade as the decade of diversity. It's important because loss of the biodiversity is like holding a financial portfolio which is unbalanced, undiversified. The same thing. Think about the food production. We manufacture so much food that is that is really based on a very small number of varieties of rice, potatoes, and whatever. It's just a question of short time until some bacteria, viruses, fungi, or whatever will attack these particular varieties. A few decades ago, 4 decades ago, we still had tens of thousands of varieties of each. Think about the potato blight in Ireland in 1846. It caused a destruction, a demographic catastrophe there. Well, sorry about that. We have this picture. I just met yesterday in the Rio 20 conference an old acquaintance of mine, Matis Wackernagel. He developed some indices showing the gap between the biocapacity that we have and the demand for eco-services. And he showed that if each of us would behave, each of the people in the world would behave the same way like the people in the developed countries, we would need like between 3 to 5 planet Earths to supply the needs. You cannot work with such an overshoot because there is no other planet that we can borrow oxygen, water, food, metals, energy from. So we have to change the way we are doing things. In recent years, this overshoot is already, on the world total, is about 50% deficit. So what happens to this invisible hand? There are a few problems here. It does work, but we have to change the process. Because the invisible hand can bring us to two scenarios. Choose which one you prefer, the right or the left. The way to go to a flourishing environment is to change, to go from a narrow capitalism to a wider one, a broader one. The question really is not how we got there. It really doesn't matter at this point anymore. The question is, that matters is that we get out. And this is the major issue here. There is an old saying, I believe it is Chinese, that says, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the next, second best time to plant a tree is now. So we missed the first one. So we have to do it now. But please, if each of us will plant a tree a day, please make sure that it is not destroying the biodiversity and that it is not getting into a monoculture. So what we have to do, we have to change the capitalism. The old form of capitalism that we know, with this invisible hand, is first aimed only at economic goals to maximize economic wealth, and it disregards other parameters. Secondly, it is meant to use only 3 sources of factors of production: land, capital, and labor. And we disregard our common property, what is called the commons. We disregard it. It has no value. It has no price, and therefore, being priceless, it's regarded valueless. There is no price. In many places, there is no price for water, no price for the air, no price for the forest and for landscape or for desert land and whatever. So we have to change that. We have to recognize also a big change in the system because we have a fourth factor of production that was added. And Mr. McGavick mentioned it, data. Data is the only source that doesn't change, that doesn't decline. It multiplies. So we have to use it. And we don't have time to talk about it. And we have to use different goals. Instead of measuring everything in terms of economic success, we have to think about the welfare, education, health, and whatever. It's like the indicators of the OECD countries are using now. We have to select multiple objective functions now. And each of the units, each of the economic units has to do it. Because if we shall aim to them, if we shall measure and aim, we shall reach it. There is no way to manage things unless you measure them. So we have to develop new measurements, new indices to guide us. And then we have to stick to them and to aim to them, because only that way we shall reach the goal. By the way, doing that, suddenly we'll be fully employed. The entire world will fully employed again, because we shall be doing something new things. I don't know if you noticed, but most of my slides are having this Reboot title. Reboot is a new technology that I worked out with some colleagues, and there will be a site in the air next week with that title, so I urge you to look at this. At this time, what we are doing there, we are trying to teach people how to change, how to make a paradigm shift. And we can't do it within the remaining 2 minutes that I have for this conversation. It cannot be done in 20 minutes either, but it can be done in 2 or 3 days. I urge you to do it. We did it with many managements, and it does work. At this point, you have 3 points of view. Some people say, what problem? There is no problem at all. It's all an invention of some weird tree huggers. Some people say, well, we see that there is a problem, but it's not ours. The government should take care of it. Some NGOs should take care of it. Bill Gates and his friends should take care of it. Some other billionaires. They don't have enough money, by the way, to do that. And the third, and I hope some of you at least are here in this point, is to say, to recognize, it is my problem. It is my legacy. It is my commitment. And you should take this stand. It is a very challenging stand to take, by the way, because you commit yourself sometimes to solutions that you don't know really what way they will take you through. It's a very important commitment, but we have no other way. It is our problem. Those of you that believe in it, I'm sure that you are taking already the right actions, but others should do it. And sometimes it's much easier than people think. For those of you who are at the edge and considering taking this approach, I really encourage you to be curious, because that will encourage you to make the first daring steps and to reintroduce innovation into your system. It's very important. So we have to reboot. Reboot, I'll go quickly through some of this. To reboot, you have to change your vision. Just think about the movie Avatar. Maybe some of you have seen it. You move there from a 2-dimensional black and white situation into a 3-dimensional, full of color and imagination world. This is the shift that you have to make. You have to take off all kinds of screens. It's very difficult to describe this situation to people that haven't been there. But you can appreciate the change by looking retroactively, backward, hindsight, and see and understand it. So to do that, you have to relook, you have to relearn, you have to rethink, you have to redesign things, and then you have to restart. And if you are tired of it, you can retire. Some last words about the financial sector. The financial sector is very important in this process. I believe that the insurers are the only one that can take hold of this situation and lead the process. Because our expertise is in risk management, and we can do things. And I'm not just talking about making your office more sustainable by saving some energy, by saving paper and whatever. But I'm talking about investment activities. The OECD just published a report saying that the required funding just for energy would be $2 trillion a year for the next almost 2 decades. They can see how we get $1 trillion a year. They don't see how we can get $2 trillion. So one is still missing. The insurance industry should bring that money in. Because remember, all these sort of profitable investment that you did in the past in environmentally unfriendly things, what were the results? The results were horrendous. Think about the asbestos case. Think about the toxic spill cases. And we had a precedent just recently where a firm went under in the chemical industry, and 3 major creditors got a verdict against them. They had to pay for the losses, for cleaning the damage. They say, we are the creditors. They said, well, you were negligent by giving them the financing for an unsustainable thing. That's a very important precedent. So at this point, leaving no footprint, which is what we call sustainability or eco-efficiency, or saving energy and doing things, is insufficient. We have to take positive steps and clean up the environment. We have to, if we learn from our mistakes, we are geniuses. But if we don't learn from them, we are really fools. Maybe you remember this guy. This is Nero, the Roman Caesar, the Roman emperor that lives in infamy because they say that he was fiddling while Rome was burning. Maybe all of us are like that. Our hair is burning on our heads, and we are still fiddling. Beware of the Nero in each of us. Rather than fiddling, we should help extinguishing, putting out the fire. You say, I'm alone, I cannot do it. Here is one Nobel Prize laureate, actually the late Wangari Maathai, that just passed a year ago. She did miracles, but I don't have time to explain it. I'd just like to finish with with the 2 slides. Reverend Ed Cole said, falling in the water doesn't drown us. You drown by staying there. So let's not stay in the water too long and drown. It's really a wake-up call, a wake-up call. In the Rio 1992, people signed the Earth Pledge. It says, we pledge to help make the Earth a secure and hospitable home for present and future generations. Even though I don't know how, I pledge this. Even though I cannot do it alone, I pledge this. Because there is no other way. There is a way out of the situation by acting. And I call all of you to join me. I believe heaven will be pleased when we succeed, and weep for us all if we don't. I thank you very much for your attention and your generous listening, although I stole 2 minutes from the schedule. I hope you'll visit our site there, and as this conference proceeds, I would appreciate if any of you that is interested could come and we should talk about these things. Thank you very much. We should